Okay, Tammy's recording. We're good.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, well, I guess we want to go around. And those of you who are online, if you are able to just hop on your mic in a second, we'll kind of go in line, like in class. But I know for me, I'm looking at academic, primarily archives. That's my main concentration. But I am one of those people who is open to public and academic in a lot of different roles. So I'm very flexible.
I'm looking at academic library job positions. My background is in a special library in Germany. I work for a government organization there as a library assistant, so that's what my background is. But I'm more interested in working in an academic library because special libraries tend to be small, and I like the bigger organizations, having bigger teams, and that's what I'm interested in.
Okay. I'm interested. I'm calling Melissa. I'm interested in academic and public, about the same. Going to change, be flexible. My second semester here, so got a lot to learn still. I'm working at the PRC. Yeah, I work there. Yeah, it's fun so far.
Okay, so we'll just kind of go in line of what we have in WebEx. So Allison, you're actually first up.
Hi, I'm Allison. Interested in public libraries. I work up in Northern Virginia in Loudoun County as an adult services assistant, and I'm really looking at getting into children's librarianship in the public sector.
Okay, and then Christina, you're up next, but if you want to put something in the chat rather than speak, you can, but if you are able to get to a mic, we prefer that.
This is Christina. Thanks for doing this web seminar workshop. I am still completely undecided about what I'm going to do after I finish my degree, but I'm in Charlotte and I'm working at the Mint Museum when I can as a volunteer, and I volunteer in my children's middle school library. But I'm really at a crossroads and open to advice, and I do need to talk to someone about my resume and get some feedback about what I could improve on it. Thanks so much.
Okay, and then Joy.
Hey, so I feel like everybody else, also actually looking mostly at academic libraries. Currently, I'm in Durham, and I work for the law school library at North Carolina Central University, but I've also worked as a paraprofessional at Duke Libraries as well.
Kim?
Good morning. My name is Kim Geisel. I am a career elementary school teacher. The last 4 years I've been teaching virtually, 4th and 5th grade for North Carolina Connections Academy in Durham. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. I do have some background in public libraries. I think I would like to head in the direction of either the children's department of a public library or a school media center. Thank you for making this available online.
Thank you for being here. So Morgan, you're next. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Morgan. All right, and Tori, you're last.
Hey.
You're gonna need to speak up really, really loudly.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit, yeah.
Well, I am interested in academic and also public libraries. There you go.
Thanks, Tori. Okay, so we have a good mix of all of them. All right. So that was everybody who was attending. Okay.
Did you have some specific questions, or you just want some general guidelines and steps?
I think general guideline and tips first. I know I have a couple of questions, but I kind of wanted to see what you guys suggested first, I guess, before we, just in case you answer them before we get to them.
Well, I can start and just kind of talk broadly about, just make sure you guys are aware and recognize that it is a very competitive field right now, whether it's academic, public, or specialty libraries. It's, there's a lot of library schools, especially in this area. You guys know that. So the point being that when there is a position open, there's usually been a lot of investment in the job description and the build-up to have that posting made available. So it's important to recognize that investment on your end of it and be specific with your CV, your cover letter, speak to the position, and speak to what about you makes a difference in the material you're providing. So, for example, rather than just putting that you have management experience because you took LIS 650, an employer doesn't know what LIS 650 is. So it's important to take that next step and kind of connect the dots. Like, so for example, if you were using a exercise in the course, maybe a library visit or some volunteer work that you were doing, that's what you want to highlight. You want to talk about what you did and why it was important to you that made a difference to you in your experience. The other thing that's important to recognize is to kind of the practice what's happening in terms of the interview process. A lot of times, and I mentioned from retail into libraries, and I didn't recognize that academic libraries have a search committee. And so the first time I walked into a room with a search committee, it was a little daunting that all these people. So, and I'll speak for us at Jackson, we're always there to help you guys with mock interviews or things like that if you need it. But it is important to kind of practice and expand your comfort level with what's going to happen in the process. So be specific in your paperwork and then practice the actual physical interaction with people so that you're comfortable in an interview setting. The other thing, and the next piece of that is usually references. Make sure that when you're putting out references that you're connecting with the reference, explaining what you're doing and why, giving them a copy of your CV so that they're prepared to speak directly to the potential job administrator when they're calling and asking questions about references. That's a general overview of some tips and stuff.
Yeah, I'll pick going up on what, this is Kathy, picking up on what Mike said. If you're looking at your, first of all, about the interview process for academic libraries, it's usually an all-day or most of the day interview. So I know that's really different from a lot of other settings where you go in for an hour or two. And you'll usually be meeting with lots of different people. Mike said you'll be meeting with the search committee, you'll be meeting probably with the department where you work, you'll be meeting with the person that will be your supervisor, so that you'll be meeting a lot of groups of people. Usually they'll invite you often they'll invite you for dinner the night before, and they will pay your way. If they don't have to pay your way, I'd think about that.
Where am I applying?
That happened to me many years ago. So that's something to think about. You often will need to make a presentation of some kind. So you need to be prepared. And as Mike said, we'd be glad to help you with that. We help our students that are here. We can figure out a way to help you online to practice those presentations. So a little bit about, maybe a little more detail about a resume. For academic libraries, I think a lot of advice in the business world and other settings is you should keep your resume to one page. Don't worry about that for an academic library. You can go on longer. So we always want to know lots of stuff. So be really clear. Again, I think a lot of resumes, they encourage you to list your skills, which is important. So what are your technology skills, for example, and that sort of thing. But what's really important is to list each job and describe what you did and what you accomplished. So we want to know what you've actually done. Be sure to include the dates for your employment. List all of your degrees and the dates you received them. And if you don't have, many of you are coming from other careers, so do list your previous employment. Much of it is really relevant, especially those couple of you said you've been teaching, and of course you've had paraprofessional positions. Those are really important. And other types of job experience are also relevant. If you've even working at a fast food restaurant, that means you've had experience dealing with customers and you developed some communication skills with that. Camp counselor, things that have helped you if you've organized stuff, you've volunteer experience, if you've been organizing an event. We recently had some applicants that we interviewed, and that was their experience, and it really counted. If you have any gaps for some reason, if you've stepped out to raise family, just explain that so that people know, okay, I didn't work for 5 years because we were busy raising children. Just to know what you were doing. If you've had any scholarships, fellowships, awards, those are really important. You studied abroad. Those are other really important things to include. And Mike touched on this too, and I just want to really reiterate, in your cover letter, you really want to address the specific job for which you're applying. Look at the job description and address those points. So why you are a really good candidate, because you've had experience in what that position is requiring. So those are the main things I wanted to cover. Another part of the process for academic libraries is often, and probably other settings as well, and perhaps you have experience with this, but there will often be a phone interview process or maybe a Skype interview process. They will give an online or phone interview for several people, and that helps them decide who to actually bring in for a face-to-face interview. So that will often be part of the process.
School librarianship is very different than my colleagues here. Many times you will already be in a school as a classroom teacher. Many of our people are, but if you're not, that's not a hindrance. My first piece of advice is look at the different school listings, whether it be at the county side or if it's a charter or a private school. Make sure you keep up with those and apply quickly. They are looking for someone quickly, especially if it's at this point of the year. If someone retires now, they're looking now. And they would love for you to have librarianship credentials, but they don't require that initially. Principals are looking for a teacher. So they want to see what type of skills you have managing children. That is often the first thing they're going to look for. And once they feel like you are able to manage children and they have trust and value in you in that role, then they start to look at your teaching skills, because as a school librarian, you are also a teacher. You are first working with students. So that's one thing that they're going to look for. So when you tailor your resume and you tailor your cover letter, do your research about the school. Understand the diverse population that might be there. Understand how many, what types of maybe languages would be spoken at the school. And its population and how many teachers are there and what you can offer for them. So the role of a school librarian, just like academic or public, is many-fold. So you're not just shelving and teaching. You're also probably the technology specialist, the webmaster, and potentially the testing coordinator, which I'm really fighting will not happen in the future. But those are things that you just need to be aware of. And when you are in your interview, speak to that, because your principal is not only looking for a leader to lead students, but they're looking for that leader in the school who can educate the faculty and be that curriculum specialist. So when you tailor your resume, put down those experiences, as she said, with camp counselor or volunteer, or anytime you've had opportunity to work with children, whether it be elementary, middle, or high. So it's very important that they see you can organize, you can manage events. Let's say you have a curriculum reading night or some type of literacy event. They want to know that you can manage all of the different people who will come, as well as volunteers. Not all schools have them, but we want to recruit them. So we need volunteers in the school system who can come in and help shelve. That's really the last thing you have time to do. So they also want to see that you can manage your students to be able to assist in those types of duties. So are you able to empower your children and train them? So when you go in for an interview, it will be unlike my friend to get dinner. You might be lucky to get a bottle of water, maybe a granola bar. But when you go in for your interview, it will very likely be a panel, which may or may not have the former librarian on it. And they will ask you questions that they think they're supposed to ask you, but what they're looking for is someone who can manage, someone who can organize, and someone who can take control of that library, because in many, many, many cases, you will know more about the library and the program than the person interviewing. So it's important to not only speak the librarian language, but be able to explain that. So if you say collection development plan, and they're going to say, what's a collection development plan? So you want to make sure that you can interpret that with, I want to make sure that we have books in our libraries that students can see themselves in. And so it's very important to kind of look at the interview process from a school librarianship position with kind of a different lens. So you will be able to apply for both in many cases if you take the proper classes. So I think it was Christina that wanted to do school, or Kim. Kim was interested in school or public. So you must think about that when you're tailoring your resume to what audience you'll have. So if you're going into a school setting because there's a position open and you want to apply, tailor your resume and cover letter to meet that need. And then if you're going to the public library, it will look very different. Although they still want to see your capabilities, what you're able to do, and events that you've planned in the past and community service, they also want to see managing students. So that's it in a nutshell.
So to kind of summarize the process and all the links, the first thing is, if there's a position you're interested in, invest in learning more about it and about the organization. And from a hiring perspective, there's a lot of people that just push the button every time a posting's out there, and we can tell the difference. So the goal is to rise up in consideration. So you start by doing your legwork on investigating about the organization and the position, and then you apply that to your CV and your cover letter with those specifics. And don't overlook little things. Your memberships, for example, are important. What you guys are doing here as an example is a good way to kind of demonstrate that you're part of LISSA, which is part of ALA, and you've helped coordinate programs, you've helped organize activities, stuff like that. I'm talking to these guys in the room here, but look at how you take those extra steps to apply, not just that you were a member, but what you did as a member. Just as an example, and look at that on all the different pieces. So the idea is that cover letter and CV gets you a phone interview, hopefully. And that could apply to public, academic, any particular organization, but it's meant to distinguish you from the other applicants to get first consideration. And then that phone interview, I think Kathy mentioned this, is critically important because that's what's going to get you an invite to campus, or, and once again, to a public domain, into a public library if that's what you want. So if you get a phone interview, take it seriously and be prepared to kind of project yourself as the candidate. And then once you get on site, that's when all the other factors come into play. Like Kathy was expanding on the search process, search day. It is a long, lengthy day, and you get asked the same question over and over again, but by different people. That's okay. And then the end of it is in making sure your references are there to support you. So it's a job, it's a project. So kind of take a project management approach to it in a way. Also, and I know this is hard when you're starting out, but look critically at yourself and say, would I hire me? Put yourself in the hiring position and say, okay, does this, to any kind of gap in your experience, am I addressing that? Try to answer questions that potential employers would have without them having to ask. Back to that competitive part of it, the more you project yourself as the candidate and the more questions you answer up front, the more successful you will be because of that competition factor. And if something bogs down, from an employer point of view, they're just going to go to the next person because there's so many people out there.
I think to add to that is really show how you have taken initiative in the past, been creative, shown leadership. Like I said, being officers in this organization is really important. But people are looking for self-starters. Obviously, when you go to a new job, you will have guidance from people. We're looking for somebody who's going to come in and make a difference, even at an entry-level job. That's really important. And so you will have unique skills that you bring to any job. So you want to show that you have those skills and that you're going to apply them and just jump in with both feet and really contribute something right off the bat.
To add to what they said, in the interview process that I've been involved in here, I've also noticed that quality applicants are always going to connect the skills they have to whatever position they're applying to and to the research of the people in that department. So if you're an academic librarian and you know the people at the panel and what their research streams are, if you could bring up how you can support that and connect with that, that shows two things. That shows, one, you have the initiative to investigate and research the people that you're sitting with and prepare for your interview. Number two, the other thing that shows is that you're organized and you're thoughtful and meticulous in your planning. Problems that I've seen happen now that I'm on the application process just for the university, I noticed that people will, they're applying to lots of different jobs. They might forget one particular place where they still listed the other school. That is a negative. So don't rush. Take your time when you're preparing and planning, and make sure that you are, I put up here in large print here, communication is key. In your school librarianship, public librarianship, academic librarianship, they want to see what an effective communicator you are, whether that's a digital newsletter to promote something and promote a program and keep those things updated, or just a very consistent ability to reply within a certain amount of time. The service that you provide for others. This is a job of service, yes. And how we work with the public, and communication is key.
Really key. People, there's this, the image of librarians sitting in dusty rooms. That's just false. Librarians are out there. We are out there. And archivists, somebody mentioned they were interested in archivists are out there teaching and showing people how to use these materials and how to apply them. So, yes, they're back processing them, but they're also out in public.
And those skills come in handy in a school setting as well. I know as a librarian, I felt like, man, I need to make sure that I keep up with the history. We were building a new school. We researched the history of that school and had materials, yearbooks from the 60s. We had a good one, just being honest. But we were able to keep all of that and share that with the community. And the people in the community were very grateful and receptive to that because it's about preserving writing.
And that movement's gaining ground. Community colleges in this state anyway have formed a group for archival activities. So that's something. Community colleges are newer than the universities that traditionally had university archives, and now community colleges and a lot of townships and things like that are growing in terms of recognizing that need and pursuing the proper way to get it handled. In fact, I saw a posting for the township of Wake Forest looking for an archivist, which is north of Raleigh. It's not Wake Forest University. So that's a good example, the current posting.
Beware.
Yeah.
So I think what we're going to do is move on to, so if anyone, we're going to move on to the Q&A. So if anyone has any questions they want to drop in the chat, we can do that, or if you'd like to turn on your mic. But I'll kind of go ahead and get started. This is something that I've been dealing with as people who are on committees and on the other side of it. Do the small, traditional, semantics of applying with your cover letter and your resume are they still important? Because I know we have the rules of your cover letter should only be one page, but I know I've seen other people who are like, well, you can go past one page now if you're really describing the importance of what's on your resume or projects that you've done, or just a lot of those small things that you shouldn't be elaborating too much in your CV or your resume because you don't want it to be this long. I'm just trying to see if those rules are still extremely necessary being on the other side, or if it's okay to kind of fudge them a little bit to get the information that you want to pass on to the hiring committee. Because I know we were just discussing, one of the other students, how in your cover letter you also shouldn't be putting to whom it may concern anymore, but sometimes with postings you really can't tell who's on the hiring committee. So should you be, I don't know, digging in and seeing who's on the hiring committee so you can actually address them in the cover letter, or can you put to whom it may concern or dear hiring committee?
Well, I think dear search committee members is okay. Anything is probably better than to whom it may concern, you know, kind of deal. But to answer your question, I think I wouldn't call it fudging. I think the thing is, don't discard little experiences because they can make a difference. And you don't want, yes, a cover letter or a CV can be more than a page long as long as you're talking about relevant information. You don't want it going on and on and on about, you know, you're out for 6 months to take care of a sick parent, and then, you know, a whole paragraph worth of that. That's not necessary. Just what it was, pure and simple. Concise. Right.
And that's because I know you brought up that and Tammy as well, that background jobs that maybe aren't extremely field relevant but have the skills. I know I've heard from a lot of people that, well, it's happened in the past, it's not really extremely relevant, so you should just leave it off. But I know for me, I have like a decade worth of retail experience as well, and so I've been told by people to either leave it off or put it on. So I'm not really sure what to do.
I would definitely put it on. You don't have to put, you know, maybe you don't have to put every single job you had, but you could say for, you know, from 2001 to 2005, I worked in retail, and then list the experiences that you had.
Okay.
Were you ever a manager? Were you, what exactly did you do on customer service? And so, and if you had any special projects while you were working in retail. I mean, Mike said he came from retail, and he had a couple library jobs before he came. And that was, I came from on the search maybe anyway. His experience was especially relevant for the job he's doing here, so that was real important for him.
Well, that's how I got into librarianship, because I started as the Access Services Manager at the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County because nobody would take the job because they didn't have, seriously, they didn't have that skill set. And so I worked on my MLS while I was doing that. But it's part of who you are, and I think Kathy's right. Pull out what part of that could be transitioned into a career in librarianship. The kind of training that you had. Like, for example, I was with Barnes & Noble for 5 years, and they had what was called a leadership development type program. And so that's part of what you want to highlight, is that you went through certain programs or training activities and completed them. And so that proves a couple different things. One, you had continuing education experience while you were doing these other jobs, but also that you might have accomplished something, you know, completed something and have a certificate or whatever, stuff like that.
And I would love a quick tip.
And if you did any training, that's important. That's important too, because that shows you can work with other. That shows you work with other people.
And I would say, you know, if you list it in your resume, you can touch on it in your cover letter without being lengthy. So look at, again, I'm going to say this, look at the specific job and tailor your cover letter to meet the needs of that particular position. So that's where you elaborate on the things they're looking for. You may have lots of extra things in your resume, but only elaborate in your cover letter for kind of what they're looking for and what they're going to be interested in. Only because, you know, the other things may be important and they may look really well to other positions, but not particularly to that one. So it's all about that tailoring and taking your time to make sure that you're addressing that need.
I want to say one more thing about resumes, and this is my own nitpicky perspective, but really be sure to to proofread it, use good grammar, make sure you don't have any typos, and so it's good to give it to somebody else, because after you've worked on it, you're really tired of it. So just like when you write a paper or do a project, have someone else read over and look at everything so that you can check those.
Kim, you have a question about continuing education credits. I think that there's also, you can make one section of your resume that kind of addresses special qualifications, and those type of classes that maybe don't go toward a degree but are still toward licensure can go in that area. So if you have certifications, if you have Microsoft certifications, if you have any real-world type training, if you've done digital competency classwork and gotten some type of CE credits for that, that's definitely relevant. Schools are going to look for that because they're looking for trainers. So kind of put one little section that has all of those things kind of listed under it, and not really awards, but more special certifications or trainings that will support that.
And then Tori has a question. She said, if we've applied to a position already, but have worked to become more competent in that position in which we've applied, do we recommend taking steps to follow up with the institution about our progress?
Never hurts to follow up and just update experience or perceptions or whatever. It just never hurts. And what should happen is it should get routed to the search committee to at least review what, whatever stage they're in.
And I would think as a follow-up email to say, just wanted to follow up with you since I've applied, blah, blah, blah. I think it's definitely appropriate.
Did anybody else? Oh, awesome.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So I know we have kind of academic and school perspective, so maybe you can answer to this, I'm not sure. But as far as using a CV versus a resume, I know a CV is appropriate in the academic setting. I'm kind of looking at public libraries, and I feel like my CV kind of demonstrates a lot more of a well-rounded picture of myself, but it is also lengthy. It's like 5.5 pages. So, is that too much? Should I cut it back, or what are your thoughts about that?
Personally, in a public library environment, they don't want a list of what you've written or presented on. They just want to know you have. So I would cut it back and just maybe add select publications and presentations, and a detailed list can be provided upon request. They have a little bit different point of view on the skill sets. They're going to want to make sure you can interact with other staff members, the public, the community. So doing presentations might be important for that point of view, or being able to write from a marketing perspective. But I'm not sure they're going to want to see a long list. They just want to prove that you can do it.
Thank you.
Okay. Were there any other questions?
CV versus cover letter, Kim said. Or not, yeah. CV is, I've learned in the academic world because I was still in the resume world, and school librarianship is going to be much more resume driven. They're looking for, two pages or so, nothing more, that really details your experience and what you can bring to the table to make students successful, because if that's your perspective in a school, it always needs to be that. A CV is really a complex list.
It's Latin, curriculum vitae.
Thank you.
So some people just call it the vita, or CD. There's different terms in here.
And I've learned it is really a list of everything: publications, presentations. That's why hers is so lengthy.
It's the scholarly output.
Right. I don't know if you could hear him. He said scholarly output of what you've done. So it's not a replacement for your cover letter at all. It's either CV or resume. But your cover letter should be with either one.
Can I make another point about public library application process? A lot of public libraries, the application process is through the county, and you want to be aware of that because the first wave of review might not be the library. It might be the county people, or HR, I should say. So just be aware of that because, and I know of a couple of personal examples from when we were doing the conference in Winston, but Forsyth County is a good example. They were opening Central Library, all the applications going to the county, and if they said in the posting they wanted let's just say 2 years public service experience in a library, and you didn't have that, and you check no, the library never saw it. So you just be careful and be aware of that. And if you're in a kind of a tight situation like that, it might be worth talking to someone in the library to say, how can I present this that you'll get to see it? And that's a county-by-county basis. So some of the bigger systems like Wake County, for example, I don't think they have that kind of barrier, but some of the medium and smaller size do.
Someone just entered the chat that Alamance County required a drug test, and that reminded me that our university and probably a lot of others, you have to go through a background check. Anybody that applies to the university for any job, and I think students as well, all have to go through a background check. So just so be prepared for that.
What is that exactly?
I think it might elaborate on what they do.
Well, it's usually at the hiring level. So the successful candidate gets the first thing they get is a agreement for a background check, and it's checking probably mostly legally for any kind of legal activity that might be out there against you, and there might be something about financial, if there's a lien against your house or something like that. It's something's on there that's not a barrier that you can't get hired, but it would be something that might have to be addressed before you can be hired.
It's also there for a practicum. If you do a practicum within a school, you'll have to have a background check or a field study. And we have had students who have had complex history. And so we have to make sure that we follow up in the district is having. Unfortunately, we've had situations where we approved them for student teaching, but then they were not eligible to be hired by the same county that they did their student teaching in because of something at the county level. So it's important to, understand that, know what you need to do, and address that with the appropriate people with your hiring.
Any other questions?
I had a question about the required section and then the preferred section. Do you have any recommendations how to go? I mean, required obviously is required, but preferred, sometimes these lists can be quite lengthy. And do you have any recommendations? Should you try anyway if you meet only a few of those items, or is there any advice?
You want to be able to meet the required.
Yeah.
And so, if the preferred, if you have a copy, then yes, I would say if you have the required, then go for it.
Okay.
The preferred, and of course, the more preferred you have, the better candidate you are.
Right.
So you want to address those as well.
And that's back to what I was saying about kind of the committee or the hiring group have invested in that dialogue. So take from the preferred kind of a picture of what they were looking for. We most recently went through a search that was not successful, where we were looking for and under prefer the JD for the legal knowledge. So if I was interested in that job and I didn't have a JD, but I had some legal experience, that's a clue that that's what they were looking for that. So you could try and kind of use those clues to enhance what you're saying in your cover letter.
Right. Okay.
And also use those other things to work on your experience to apply for maybe the next position. So if you know what lots of different libraries are looking for, see what you can do to get some experience in those areas.
I've been doing that, but I was just wondering if, like, you don't meet all the preferred, maybe you shouldn't even try, or,
And actually,
and in your case, I'm sorry, but in your case, being bilingual, or maybe you have additional languages in the legal class, so you really want to emphasize that. And, so other people, if you have language skills, foreign language skills, put that on your resume.
And your undergraduate degree, from that point of view, can also be useful if you're applying for subject-specific positions and you have that background within your undergrad. Make sure to pull that up and highlight.
So, someone said, even if you have just beginning language skills, what you can say is if you're fluent, or if you have reading knowledge, sometimes reading knowledge is plenty, even if you can't speak it particularly well. That's usually the level you say reading knowledge or fluency. someone also says, what's the best way to say I'm in grad school in a cover letter? So what you want to say is, like if you're graduating in May or August, say MLS, expected graduation May 2019 or August 2019. I think it's probably that's right.
Okay, any other questions?
Oh, sign language. Yes, that would be a real plus. Someone said they're learning a lot of sign language.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that would be good.
Very good.
So if we actually don't even want
Oh, sorry. I cut in at the wrong time. Okay, so I have kind of a formatting question. I read somewhere that it was best to send a resume and cover letter in PDF format so it could be edited, and just to ensure that the formatting when people get it is the correct way that it's been that you formatted it. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I agree. It's not as much about being edited as it is that different programs and or printers, devices and stuff could manipulate a Word document. So a PDF is always a little safer from that point of view, that it comes out looking the way you want it to. And you want a cover letter and resume to be neat and efficient. You don't necessarily want it to be bells and whistles. Sometimes people are putting enhancements on there that distinguish themselves, and that's okay, but there's a limit to doing that. I think when you get past that limit, then you're distracting from what you're trying to say about yourself, and the focus becomes, oh, how pretty this is, or how unusual it is, or something like that. So you can be creative, but just make sure you kind of keep it within some limits.
I'll also know that most of these are going into portals, especially if they're at the district level, county level, whether it's public or academic. So when things go into a portal, a PDF is generally it's welcome.
Christina asked if there's any preferred font type.
I think as long as it's just clear, and then there's some accessibility issues with some fonts, and I would think about that.
Yeah.
But no so weird Gothic or something.
No cursive.
Just something that's clear.
Yeah, you want to stick with probably common fonts and not try to get, once again, too far out there to be different.
I also think, we haven't said this, but I think a good idea as well, somewhere on there, if you're in a school library and let's say you manage a specific Twitter or social media group, that is all about marketing now. So if you have your Twitter handle, you have your, not your personal stuff, but if you do something that's school related, if you're in a school system, or, if you're volunteering for a community, some type of organization, and you've been involved in that, that's also something very valuable. Twitter and Facebook, more so Twitter,
LinkedIn
is very important.
Like LinkedIn, Instagram, all those things, yeah.
And yes, Allison, I don't think love letters.
No, sorry, no problem.
Yeah.
You save that for your slide presentation.
Well, and in an academic library interview, you will be expected to do a presentation more than likely to a large group. So once again, that whole preparation and practice is important.
That's when you can do your bubble slides.
And let me throw it in a school setting. You will probably have a panel, and I have had schools that have asked for some type of, not necessarily presentation, but to do a sample lesson. So they may want to see how you would train staff in some type of technology, or they may want to see how you would put together a lesson. Because again, they're looking for a curriculum leader in their schools. So be prepared.
And in an academic setting, if you're applying for a job that includes information literacy, your presentation will likely be a lesson plan or a mock presentation to students.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. Last call for questions. So if we don't have any other questions, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up since we are almost at noon. So thank you so much for being here and answering our questions and providing us with a lot of really helpful tips. I know for those of us who are currently in the job search part of our careers, we're stressing out and getting nervous. So, so if that's it, I think we are done today. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much, Charles.
Thanks
Good
for having
question.
And for the recording, I think Allison's the best person to email that to when it's finished processing.
Yeah, you can just email me and attach the MP3 file or MP4, whatever file it is, and I will get it up